Today we have a very special guest joining us, Richard Williams. Richard is the executive chairman at Bunker Hill Mining and specializes in creating value from turning around distressed companies and situations. Formerly the COO of Barrick Gold and its executive envoy to Tanzania, he was responsible for leading the team that doubled its operating profits from 2015 to 17 and resolved an existential crisis with the Tanzanian government to enable its highly successful purchase of Randgold Resources. He now leads a hand-picked team of ex-Barrick leaders committed to restarting the Bunker Hill mine as the cornerstone asset in a new North American mining company focused on the regeneration of closed mine sites and other distressed assets. Thanks again for joining us on The Rocks. If you like what you hear and want to catch past conversations, please make sure to subscribe. Now let's dive in. Well, Richard, thank you so much for joining me here on The Rocks. You and I know each other from running around Afghanistan together a little bit, but you've been all over the world. So I wanted to open with a question of what is your favorite country that you've worked in so far?
Favorite in terms of the most challenging, that then offered the most rewards if we got it right. You asked me about Afghanistan. Afghanistan was incredibly special. You know, if you were able to turn around the future of the Afghan mining industry, which is an ambition far beyond what you and I could achieve on our own, you would change materially the future for that country. And with the people that we worked with, and you remember living out in the field with the Afghans, miles from where the military were, you could see it too. They were hospitable, they were friendly, they bought into the opportunity, they were suspicious, and you had to win their trust. But on the basis of that, you knew that if you could bring the right expertise and the right capital work and do it in the right way, you could materially change a country. And that's really what brought one into mining in the first place, Emily, in that it has the ability to change the futures of the societies within which it works if it's done right. And that's like a lot of primary industry, agriculture and mining being the top two, fishing and so on, but agriculture and mining, it's really a pretty satisfying place to work.
Yeah, and that's why I think I even have myself labeled on LinkedIn right now as a mining futurist. When people ask me why, it's because where we are right now in terms of where the world is going, the economies are going, mining is fundamental to determining what future we'll have in 20 to 30 years. Younger investors, younger professionals maybe don't realize that yet, but what we do in this industry fundamentally changes the future of the planet in so many different ways. I mean, at the country level, but also globally.
It's true. I mean, the world needs metal for its existing systems, and it needs even more metal for the systems that will be more green than our forefathers, our grandparents enjoyed. I mean, I think the mining is one part of the source of that metal, of course, because I think recycling is going to be a very important part of the provision of metals downstream. And that part of the metal industry will evolve in the same way as mining has to evolve to do better than our predecessors did.
Yeah, and that's you and I were chatting a little while ago about how do we attract the new batch of investors, even just people into the industry to work, right, and be involved in the mining industry. And in your words, how do we get people in the room, right? And do you see a way to kind of paint that picture of the future that encourages that?
I think if we look at the younger generation of both investor, employee, or partner, spectator, NGO, stakeholder, whatever you want to characterize them at, the majority of them today will look at mining as a dirty, short-term industry that may produce things we need. It's an unfair characterization because a lot of good works happen, but has in the past done it and is doing it today in ways that hurt the environment. So we've actually really got to work to improve what we do, but then make everybody understand, who is a very critical audience, that what we're doing is not as it was done before.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks see us as a necessary evil.
That's right. And again, the benefits of mining beyond just the essential metal that is used in cars, houses, and so on and so forth is one thing. The method at which they're extracted and processed and refined and distributed is another thing. But then the benefits that go into, if it's done well, the environment, and the communities around mining are less well presented. It can be transformational. And I actually think, as friends of mine have said, it's a strategic imperative, something that we must do for our own existence to ensure the benefits to a community and environment is more than just from mining. It's all the other parallel multiplying businesses that happens around a mine that people can see and be part of is part of our story.
It's a huge multiplier. The statistic we used to use, at least, was for every job you create out of mine, it's 7 satellite industry jobs that are created, right? And they're increasingly technical as well. So I know the countries you and I have both worked in, here's an opportunity to bring really technical jobs and therefore education and infrastructure into communities that maybe are really looking for that kind of investment, right? I mean, the industry really helps elevate a lot of those communities in that way.
No, it does. There's a lot of companies refer to the eliminating poverty dimension, the eliminating poverty effect of mining. The challenge, of course, with mining is mines are finite. At some point, they close. And that's either because there is no more metal, or more importantly, the metal that remains can't be mined economically with the technology of that particular day. And so, what can happen is you get this surge of investment into a community that ends. And when it ends, you're left with something that needs to be tidied up. And yes, some technically trained employees that have to go somewhere else to find work. I've been spending quite a lot of time in previous companies as well as one's current company, looking at how we can offer a community more than just the life of mine and seed other businesses, not directly through our balance sheet, but bringing in partners that can do this, that will endure beyond the life of mine, so that you don't end up with this socio-economic devastation when the mine shuts. And I think that's part of our responsibility too, to think longer term than just the limit of our mine life.
Well, and that's why I think it's so interesting what you're doing at Bunker Hill, because you're going into an old mine, first of all, right? I mean, you're creating value out of an area that's already received some of that investment and gone through that close down, essentially. And then you also have a great ESG strategy as far as how you're going to handle the investment in that area. How did you kind of take some of the lessons you learned internationally and watching those assets into a project like Bunker Hill?
Yeah, I think Bunker Hill is a perfect example for this. But if I'll come back to why we went to Bunker Hill in the first place, as you remember, Emily, I was chief operating officer of Barrick Gold for a few years, 4 years or so, and led a turnaround of that company's operating performance. And one part of that operating performance was its management of its closed sites. Large corporations, mining companies, and gold companies in particular, because gold mine lives tend to be short, end up with a very large number of closed mine sites, often in developed countries, United States, Canada being obvious examples, often not. When you look at those closed mine sites, there is a cost to keeping them tidy, in other words, they don't upset the environment, there's also a lot of value that can be unlocked. And so what I did at Barrick is we pulled all of these things together, well over 50 closed mine sites globally, that was costing $130 million a year to manage. I had them all in a closed site portfolio and gave it to our mutual friend, Brad Barnett, to manage.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I said to Brad two things. One, can you ensure that we meet all of our obligations as efficiently as possible? But secondly, can you look for value in each of these sites and see whether there's something we can do to create that value? And the value doesn't necessarily just come from mining, because a closed mine site has infrastructure, has power, has roads, often has a community, and has water. Sometimes the water is dirty, but the water, when cleaned, can be very useful. And it has land. And in Western United States, it's often private land, courtesy of the regulations of the 1872 Prospecting Act. So you can permit quite a lot on it quite quickly. And so Brad looked at a lot of these sites, and he created concepts for agriculture, real estate, leisure, mining. Some of these assets, SK Creek in particular, we spun out and sold to another mining company to develop. That was a good way of creating value. But the others, for a large mining company, weren't something that they were particularly interested in. So that gave us a seed of an idea. And we said, well, what happens if we set up a company that studies all of these closed mine sites in North America and sees where we can create value? And because our core business is mining, we want to go somewhere where we can generate serious cash flow from mining, but then look if we can bring in partners to develop agriculture, real estate, leisure, water businesses, and so on and so forth, in ways that really truly regenerates the depressed societies or the depressed environments that are around closed mine sites. So we looked all over the place for a site where, firstly, the mining would be very successful, that we knew that we could have something that would be very long life. And for us, that's greater than 30 years, low cost at the bottom end of the cost curve, and could be done in ways that would meet the most strictest environmental standards and community standards on the planet. And North America is a pretty good place to start for that. And so we came across Bunker Hill. And our plan at Bunker Hill is not just to get the mine running, which we will do, and everything will be underground, including waste and tailings deposition. So the area of outstanding natural beauty that is the Silver Valley in the panhandle of Idaho won't even know the mining's happening. But we'll employ 150 to 200 people who currently don't have jobs. But what we're going to do is we're going to bring in parallel businesses that create waste to energy plants that creates green power, that pyrolysis plants that creates biochar that helps to lock up carbon, real estate businesses, support the local leisure businesses, ski resorts, golf courses, and so on and so forth. So that actually what you see is the total regeneration of a community that had been devastated courtesy of the mine being shut in 1981 because of environmental mismanagement. And so when you look across North America, worldwide, you could do the same. There's a lot of metal in the ground in areas that are private land that has a range of other opportunities, business opportunities, that will benefit the local community. And so we see Bunker Hill, I don't want to get promotional here, being an example of what we can do elsewhere. And so we see our business being a regeneration business where the majority, by significant degree, of its future income will come from the sale of green metal, but will also deliberately, through its partnerships, create that multiplying effect of an ecosystem that transforms these economies. And in North America, which needs a lot of metal, we will help. We won't meet its demand. We will help where supply and demand don't meet. And you won't be having to go all around the world to get it. And the metals we choose, we want 50% of it or greater to be precious, with the majority of that being silver, which helps in the green economy. Silver is a very, very, well, the best conductor around, but is used in all of the electronics and power industries. Where you're seeking silver comes lead, zinc, copper, gold, and elsewhere. And we'll be producing that too. And when you have a model that works in a region, what that really means is you build an understanding of the region and relationships that truly exist as partnerships. And this includes, most importantly in North America, with the United States Environmental Protection Agency, who's been managing Bunker Hill's water since it shut down in 1981 and has been tidying up the place very effectively. And the US taxpayer should be exceedingly pleased with what it's done. And we see them not as an inspector, although they have a regulatory requirement. We see them as a development partner. And so we see this Bunker Hill thing as much more than a mining project. We see it the start of a regeneration business in North America. And in so being, we see ourselves being part of what's happening in the industry to ensure that industry benefits are more than just the supply of metal to the society, but actually are able to do all of these things I've just outlined in terms of socioeconomic transformation. And we think that will attract the support of a broader set of stakeholders than those who have traditionally been in mining.
Are you getting different questions because of that approach? Like when you talk to investors right now, are they asking you about those aspects? Because I know I hear from a lot of folks that say, oh, we hear everybody talk about ESG, right? That it's the new thing, you've got to pay attention to it. Well, when it really comes down to it, like the investors don't really care. Are you seeing that? Or are you seeing a shift yet?
I'm seeing a shift. I think with ESG, environment, social, and governance practices, there is a little bit of box ticking. So when people are going to invest in you, The easiest one to audit is, have you got, as a public company, have you got the right governance procedures in place? Are you structured properly as a board? Do you report and communicate in the right way? Have you got the right controls, separations, and so on? I've always been grateful for that demand from the capital markets, and I think any mining, both in mining investor and operator, should be. So you find that area is typically covered quite a lot. What's your compensation plan? Is it aligned to shareholder value? And all those things. I mean, S and the E part. The E part, the environmental management, it's a simple question, really, from investors' perspectives. Are you compliant with all the regulations and the rules in place?
Yes, no answer, really.
It's a kind of a yes and no one. And if you're taking risk with it, how much risk is everybody happy with, or not? But the S piece, the social, the benefits, there they generally talk around, have you built a school? Are you doing the right thing with your employees, and so on, both of which are good. All of those things are good. But are you genuinely turning mining into a long-term positive impact business? And do I, as an investor, see real value in that? We're not seeing people in the capital markets that we're talking to, and we're obviously typically in the mining capital markets, giving that much credit yet, but we think they will do. The need for mining companies to conform to high environmental standards, do the right thing by the community and investors, it's not just appeared this year or last year. It's been around for a long time. But your question is more about, are we finding investors seeing value in what we're doing beyond just the narrow definition of a mining business? I'd say they're interested in this, and this is those who invest in mining, but they're yet to fully wake up to it. Second element to your question is, how do we attract non-mining stroke generalist or impact investors into mining? That's really what I'm targeting. I want to go to London, New York, Toronto, Vancouver, wherever it may be, and go to someone who's never invested in mining before and say, look, for your dollar of investment, look what money you'll make, but look what impact you'll also create too. And we're early in on that. And we think Bunker Hill is a great example of an opportunity for such investors. But we've got a lot of work to do to persuade people that we're not like our predecessors. And we're up for that challenge. But it isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time.
No, I think it's such a fundamental change in how people look at and evaluate mining companies, and frankly, whether they even look at them at all. Being here in South Florida, I try to go to a lot of family office events, right? Which really has been a tough sell for mining investment, because many family offices have these, intergenerational commitments to the environment and stewardship in particular, right? And this idea of wanting to invest in things that will pass down generationally. And so for me, logically, like, it makes a lot of sense. Mining is a great way to do that, but that message just isn't there. And I think what you all are doing with Bunker Hill, is painting that bigger picture of what we've seen in Afghanistan and North Africa and Tanzania. You can have, if you invest in a mining project that's done the right way, you can fundamentally change the way a community grows and thrives and has resources. And what better legacy is there than that to a family office investor or an impact investor? And it's just about getting out there and telling that story many times, I think.
Exactly. And we'll start to see it. I mean, there's a good example of this happening in Foran, which is polymetallic development project in Canada, in Saskatchewan. People like Pierre Lassonde are behind it, and Dan Myerson, who's a friend, who's the executive chairman of it. And they brought in Fairfax. Fairfax, it was their first non-mining investment. And it took the valuation of that company from a $50 million market cap to a $500 million market cap in months. And good on them. They managed to make this presentation work. If there are more of us, and we'd obviously like to do something similar, but if we're all basically saying the real test that I want to pass is to have non-mining generalist investors, social impact investors coming to support us, and can I meet their standards and expectations? That's what we should really be trying for. Because when we get that happening, you'll suddenly see that mining will have access to greater pools of capital, and that capital will be much stricter with mining. So not only will you get more mining, you'll get better mining, we're happy to play our small part in that, and we're learning from others. And I speak of Foran because one of the things you have to do in the mining industry is to learn from other people. There are very few mistakes you're about to make or opportunities you think you've discovered that somebody else hasn't seen or done before. And so you've got to have a pretty wide, low ego perspective to say, actually, what those guys did in Foran is amazing. How do we do the same thing? And if we're all sharing those ideas, everybody benefits because society gets more metal, it gets mined in a better way, and all of our businesses are much more robust. But no one should adjust their standards. The standards should be very, very high, and it should be really hard to meet. And that's how you'll get us all as an industry doing the right thing.
Well, and I think the other benefit of having non-traditional mining investors, for lack of a better phrase, because we have a lot of them at Analog Gold, right? Almost all of our analog folks are not traditional mining folks. One of the strengths of that is they all come from different walks of life and businesses. And because they're able to invest in a gold company, you know that they've been successful, right? And they bring a lot of lessons learned from other industries, whether it's the medical profession, restaurants, tourism, real estate, right? That when you talk to them about what you're doing at the company, they ask questions and raise opportunities that a regular mining person would never raise or think of. Many of them along the lines of what you're talking about, right? How do you add value in creative ways? What's the business plan? Which sounds silly, but like in the mining industry, nobody asks you what's the business plan, right? It's about how are you adding ounces? How are you growing? What's your transition point? Hey, if you're going to make money, you should have a business plan, right?
It's so funny you say that because I remember one of the early parts of Bunker Hill. Like again, I by nature are pretty thorough as a person. We were trying to attract a particular strategic investor, and they asked for a business plan, and we provide them exactly what any business would describe. Strategic vision, SWOT analysis, capital allocation priorities, a whole deep thing, along with pages upon pages of the spin-off benefits that would come from this investment and how we could participate in all of that. All the investor wanted was an Excel spreadsheet with an understanding of a series of the assumptions we were making on grade and cost. That's 3 pages of our 50-day business plan. And you're right. From that Excel spreadsheet comes a risk-weighted, risk-analyzed view of our future cash flows based on external inputs, input costs, commodity prices, treatment charges, refining charges. But as I always say on baseline position, you never factor in, and this is what the amazing story of my time at Barrick was, you never factor in what humans can do to your business plan. Well, when we doubled Barrick's operating margin, I didn't have a single idea. It all came from the people on the mine sites. They all knew how to double the company's operating margin, but they'd never been asked. They just didn't get the opportunity to execute on that. What we provided them was the opportunity to do it. They didn't muck around with the mine plans and bring grade forward. They didn't take capital out that was irresponsible. Their ideas and their intuition and their energy and their willingness to commit was unlocked. And suddenly the company makes twice the amount of money from each pound of earth it moves than at the previous time. And that people dimension to mining, I find just wonderful. And we go back to Bunker Hill. This is a place that's been producing metal since the 1880s. And it's got a turbulent history with its workforce. I mean, to the point at which, at one point, the CEO of the company was killed because of a car bomb under his 1890. Martial law in 1882. This is the history of the American West. And the development of unions and so on, all clashing. But when you go into the Silver Valley and you meet young people that want to become miners, they come from a very proud history of people that if you can motivate them the right way, and that's not just financial motivation, that's speak to them as partners and engage and lead and be inspired by them, they deliver solutions that are just they're just amazing. And you see, that's what you're wanting to unlock in the Silver Valley. You're wanting to unlock all that passion and energy and pride in a modern way. I mean, I found it in Nevada when working with Barrick Nevada, and before it was known as Barrick Nevada, but all these various mine sites. It was just such a rich scene of good ideas and energy and pride and passion. And that's part of why one got into the mining industry, because you can feel it, and that's what will change things. And that's part of what I think when we do a sale to investors that we don't make enough of. The labor is not an input. It's central to the business. Whether it's a high-tech mining business or not, the talent that you employ and how you motivate that is what will make the difference between an average business and a truly excellent one. And I found I love being up around the mine site there, because the same thing, people come and talk to you and say, well, what about this? And where did that idea come from? And it comes from them, because they're within the environment, and they're true stakeholders in the future opportunity that we're hoping to create. I think that's a really important part. That's changed over time, Emily. I mean, I don't want to go through the history of industrialization, but the relationship between management and capital and employment has changed dramatically and continues to change dramatically. So millennials today expect much more of an employment opportunity than their grandparents ever would have thought possible, and quite rightly so. And so our task as leaders is to see that as an opportunity, not as a cost.
And you come from, call it a non-traditional mining leadership background, right? Would that be fair to say? I mean, with some of your other life experiences, and it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on bringing that into the mining industry. But even just for me, my experience in consulting at the beginning of my career, and then working, in countries like Afghanistan with the Pentagon and the special operations community in particular, has taught me that by, through, and with is a leadership principle that works every time, right? Whether you're talking young employees, really experienced folks, partners, stakeholders, half of the battle is just getting out of the way, right? As management, right? I mean, half of leadership, I guess, is stepping to the side and letting the other folks that have the ideas and the expertise step up, right? And kind of share what's going on, and getting them to lead, right? And I don't think we do that enough in the industry.
You're right that we don't do enough of that in the industry, but there are a lot of companies that are embracing the best way to get the most out of their people. And I found 20 years or so in the military and mining that what you just said resonates, in that the frontline leadership talent, if it's carefully selected and motivated, whether it's in the military or whether it's in mining, are that which is going to turn you into a truly excellent company. And so your job as a leader, beyond providing vision and ensuring capital is allocated to support the right ideas and take on the risks associated with that, is to make sure that you truly invest in that frontline leadership and the technical skills, so that you are constantly getting the best out of them. And sometimes when the mining industry, the mining labor market, often it's a question of, if I've got somebody who isn't working very well, I'll buy another one from somewhere else, as opposed to saying, right, how do I train and develop this capability? And some mining companies do it very well, others don't. When you're very junior and you haven't got a lot of money, it's kind of hard to do that. And so you tend to sort of work with what you've got. But as long as what you've got has got some great potential, as the leader of something small, you've got to recognize that you must spend a lot of your time unlocking that potential. And sometimes it's because they're nervous about giving ideas. Sometimes they give too many ideas. Sometimes they don't understand the big picture. You have to communicate constantly to ensure that everybody sees the world as much as they can the same way in terms of what we're trying to do. And then you must allocate some money to investing in that competency. And when you do that, remember, we're going to be restarting a mine. So between now and restarting the mine, depending on whether we go through a toll milling phase or not, which we think we will, it could be very soon. We've got to build capability to do that, capability that will meet our standards and meet the future standards and so on, which is a really terrific challenge. So we're actively working right now to ensure we've got the right people that can do that. And that's an example of, I think, what every company has to do. But you remember, in the military, we had to take that exceedingly seriously. And I know many in the mining industry do, but we have to do it even more so.
Yeah, no, and I think that's where, when I look at my experience with Prospector, when you have a new technology product where nobody's worked with it before, because you're literally building it every day, right? It becomes so important, because your employees are not just in the production business, right? They're in the creative business because it's an interesting blend. And what I've found in working with folks coming straight out of school in many cases is, this drive, not just for millennials, which I guess technically I'm on the upper end of the millennial spectrum, but the next generation, even more so, right? The more you can encourage participation at the idea stage and they get to see those ideas go from ideation through development to being a real thing, the more excited they are and the more everything makes sense. And I don't think that's just for that generation, but I would imagine a project like Bunker Hill, similarly, young folks coming into the industry and getting to be part of it from day one must be really exciting for them.
No, really. And again, it's no surprise. I mean, we'll have to build our workforce initially through contractors and then to full-time employees over time. We've got to be sensible about fixed versus variable costs at a time like this. But our contractors, and I don't, Jeff and Steve are their names in particular, both of them are high school sports coaches and have been for a very long period of time. They're exactly the type of leaders to build and motivate skill and commitment. And the reason they're successful as contractors is for that reason. The reason we partner with them so well is because their philosophy about humans and human development and people and children and sport is exactly the same as ours. And so when I talk to your point about do investors get this? Some do, particularly those who've got experience outside the financial sector. That human piece was critical. I go back to the Barrick story, and I'm not a superhero. It was the people that delivered that. I'd go to a mine site and ask questions, and they'd come up with things. And we would, with some experts who knew more about me than engineering, metallurgy, or geology, or elsewhere, would say, actually, that idea is the one we should back. But then what I'd be sitting and saying, okay, does that leader who I've now given that responsibility to, do they have the guts, drive, endurance, determination to make it happen? Because when you get moving, your idea is going to go slightly wrong. Have you got that, as you said, determination, creativity, flexibility, endurance to be able to deal with that unexpected outcome and optimize it, make it better, get it back on track, even make it better than what you thought? And so you're constantly looking for that. But it's the same. That's why I like Jeff and Steve, the two high school coaches. It's exactly the same as when you're looking at trying to get the most out of people on a sports field. Whether, you and I have experience in Afghanistan with some great people, I've had some experience there too, militarily and non-militarily. I've learned so much about what motivates me and learned so much about what works and what doesn't work. And I'm still learning with people that element to this is so key. So we go back to the ESG piece, environment, yeah, governance, yeah, and there's an element of human in the governments, but it's that S piece incorporates also your partnership with your labor force. They're not something that you take for granted. It's a genuine relationship that you've built over time. And I don't think that millennials or others or younger will necessarily credit mining for that. We've all got a lot of work to do to make people realize that it is a place to work where your ideas, your creativity, your passion, your commitment is valued, whatever your background.
I've been advocating for a while to anybody who can listen. I'm like, why is it that even in children's cartoons, it's always the construction site, right? Like the number of cartoons that my daughter, who's almost 6 now, watches, where you've got like all these different cats or PJ Masks, like they all have like a construction element because kids love trucks and digging and all those things. Like the same as mining. Why can't we get a mining cartoon character? Right? Yeah. If you know anybody, we can pitch that too. Because I think it starts really, really young, getting kids excited about geology and engineering. And there are a lot of great initiatives out there, for example, on coding. Right now, it's like kids at 5 start learning how to code and you get them coding toys and stuff. All of my daughter's friends love rock collections. We've got to kind of also support that at a very young age so that by the time they're in high school and college, they're thinking about this as an option, that this would be a cool place to work and cool stuff to do.
Yeah, but you give me a very interesting idea. The more we can do of that, the better. Because you're quite right. You say when we're looking at support in the modern mining industry, yes, it's money, and money should be discerning and demand high standards and expect good, high outcomes. But it's all the other stakeholders in mining, which is the humans, the future employees, the partners outside the mine gate, the beneficiaries of mining as well as those that are critical of mining. That requires a much consistently open, energetic engagement. It's not for everybody, because some people just like pushing buttons and letting things happen. But mining's much more human than people realize, and that's part of why I love it.
That's a great point. And then to close out today, Richard, I've been asking everybody this season, if you could wave your magic wand and change or innovate one part of the industry that overnight you could just make it happen the way you wish it was, what would it be?
It'll be the capital markets. It'll be the capital markets looking into mining, the non-traditional capital markets looking into mining as an opportunity, as a place to create significant financial and impact returns. That would be the thing that would transform the industry overnight.
That's such a great point. I'm with you on that one. I would wave my wand for the same wish. Well, thank you so much, Richard, for coming on, and we really look forward to touching base with you and hearing how the project progresses and hearing how things go at Bunker Hill.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you very much for having me, and God bless you.
Thank you to our guest and my colleague, Richard Williams, for joining us on this episode of On the Rocks. To learn more about Richard, visit him on LinkedIn and Twitter at Bunker Hill Mining. For more insights on new mining projects, news, and more, go to our website at prospectorportal.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Nugget. Thanks for joining us on The Rocks. If you enjoyed the episode, click the subscribe button and please leave us a review. Until next time, keep your glasses full and your ice cold. Cheers.